was that he was going to make his family rich within his tenure of office. So once that wasn't on the table, and that wasn't the basis on which we voted for him, there was hundreds of millions that Data Bank has made from these Euro bonds and all our other borrowings must be returned to the chest. They must return that money. As for that money, it will never go away. We will pursue them to wherever they will return that money. So, Mr. Ofori-Atta, look, this is the best time to return it. This is the best time. The president, look, we are pushing for constitutional reforms. We'll be asking that the constitution be amended. The next president coming, we'll remove the immunity. We'll prosecute them. We will remove the immunities. Yes,
so
that money.
So this call you're making for the return of the money, you intend to, beyond this public appeal, you intend to take it up beyond this public appeal, so to the court of law, to test the law on this matter as a lawyer?
Obviously, Mr. Okansi, timing is everything. So even a law student will tell you that, Martin, why don't you wait when the president leaves office? That's when we will go to court. But then he will no longer have any influence. Mr. Ofori-Atta will not be in office. So nothing. It will be far more easier in court, because don't forget, there are some things you can't control, and everything can be said in public. So the best time is when they leave office. So, Mr. Ofori-Atta, look, you better release the money now. Let's forgive you, and close this chapter, than when you leave office. Because when you leave office, Master, look, it will be. Oh, come on.
Let me welcome Mama Yarga is the Member of Parliament for the Bawku Central Constituency. Served a number of capacities as Minister in this country. Mama Yarga, good morning. Welcome to Key Point.
Good morning.
Well, let's talking about the takeaways from the domestic debt exchange program that has ended. Honorable Nia Ikwuotu agrees with many who have raised questions about the manner in which it was done and the sacrificing of extensive engagement and consultation, which resulted in some of the reactions that we saw. And we've gone through the number of months that other countries took who went on the same path during their engagement with the IMF in restructuring their domestic debts. That's what you see there. So Argentina, Barbados, you have Uruguay as well in there, and then Grenada. They took between 11-4, you see there, 5 months, and then 6 months. In fact, Grenada, in restructuring their domestic and international debt, took about 32 months to do so. They had 100% participation rate. And they did not have to reduce the size of the domestic debt that they put up for the restructuring program, as against what we saw in Ghana, where even though we were seeking to restructure 137 billion, we ended up restructuring just a little over 97 billion because of the resistance and the exclusions that the finance minister had to do because of the lack of consultation. Honorable.
Yeah, good morning to my colleagues in the studio and to our viewers and listeners. I don't know if the domestic debt exchange program has come to an end, because I thought you said the domestic debt program that has come to an end. I don't know if it has come to an end. Indeed, I think it is just beginning. It's just beginning, because I'm sure even the IMF, when they are engaging with you, one of the key questions they will ask is, have you satisfied your domestic regulatory regime in terms of the things that you bring to them? If you haven't satisfied your own domestic regulatory regime and the requirements in your constitution and your laws, and then you go to the IMF, they will ask you to go back and make sure you have satisfied those issues, because they will avoid a situation where they will lend you their money only for your national courts one early morning to tell them that the person who came and took the money had no legal basis for taking it, or that the commitments that the person made to them based on which they gave the money had no foundation in law. and therefore those commitments are illegal, unconstitutional, and unacceptable. This has happened several times. I mean, people may be thinking that this is far-fetched, but no, this has happened several times. And the former Attorney General will bear me out that several cases have gone to a Supreme Court in which the same government of Ghana approached power suppliers and entered into power purchase agreements with them. And when it came to time for government to own up in terms of its own commitment, the same government said, no, we didn't comply with our internal constitutional arrangements for purchasing this, power. So the agreements are unconstitutional because it didn't go to Parliament. I'm sure
the cases are there.
Yes. So
planned on the same agreement.
Yes. So the same government turned around and said, we forgot. We didn't comply with our internal constitutional arrangements. So the power purchase agreement that we entered into with you, those power purchase agreements are void, and therefore we need to sit and look at it again. So, in case somebody is thinking that IARGA, is just going too far, this has happened in this country before. So, the IMF itself will be interested in whether or not the commitments that you bring to them are commitments that are cast in stone in terms of your own internal regulatory regimes. And that is why I tell people that I don't know if the DDE is over, because I think it's actually just...
I say it's over based on the finance minister's own communication, that as at February
That's what I'm saying, that the finance minister, I understand him, he's not a lawyer. I don't think he's benefited from the best legal advice anyway, but we can forgive him for that. But I don't know if it is over, because so far as I'm concerned, it's actually just beginning. If he goes to negotiate with bondholders, and they make him new offers, so far as I'm concerned, those new offers must come to Parliament for parliamentary consideration. And until it has come to Parliament, and until Parliament has considered it, it is a very vulnerable position for anyone holding these new bonds to put the total together and go and tell the IMF that now I have renegotiated, because that can be set aside on any day. So I believe that the process really has just begun, which is that he's going to negotiate. New offers have been made to him based on new terms and conditions. And our constitution is very clear. It says that when you go and contract a loan, you should come to Parliament for Parliament to approve by a resolution the terms and conditions of the loan. I hear people say, oh, but these are all loans and then he's only renegotiating. I mean, my senior is here, the former Attorney General. I'm sure he recalls our first year contract law. Once there's an offer and then there's an agreement, and later on the bondholder, even if voluntary, he comes back and says, I'm trading in my old bond for a new bond with a different tenure and then coupon rate. That becomes a new offer. That sets aside the previous offer and becomes a new offer. And then it is left to the government to accept or reject that offer. So that becomes the subject of a completely new, loan agreement. And the Constitution is very particular. It says that the terms and conditions of any borrowing that the government is engaged in must be brought to Parliament for consideration and approval by a resolution. So you can't say that because they are old bonds and then you have gone to renegotiate them. Once there's renegotiation and the people are offering you new terms, the new terms will still be subject to parliamentary approval because they are new terms. And the Constitution says for every borrowing, the terms and conditions must be approved. So you are borrowing afresh, technically. And so it will be a big misunderstanding of what the objective of the Constitution is if we just assume that we can go and renegotiate and that is it. We don't need to come to Parliament for approval. And your concern about timelines, I've always said that our Parliament is capable of moving at lightning speed because we have provisions in our constitution that enable us in one day to do everything that the finance minister needs. Just one day. We can do everything that the finance minister needs. In a day. In a matter of hours, he was Attorney General, he will know that he could bring anything under certificate of urgency and then we could just sit. And from the very beginning, he should have known that he needed parliamentary approval. And when he started, we were on recess, Parliament could have been recalled. The finance minister could have told Parliament that, look, we are in a national crisis. We need to meet timelines with the IMF. Can you please convene to consider these matters and give us the necessary approvals? And I believe that everybody would have left their recess to come and then sit and assist. But it's still not late. I mean, we're here. We're in Parliament. He didn't want to come. We forced him to come. We made the constitutional arguments. The Speaker has advised that we should bring a motion. Yesterday, we filed a motion.
So I understand 5 of you.
Yes.
Filed this private member's motion.
Yeah, I mean, all of us could have signed on the minority side, but it really doesn't matter. Even one person can sign. So we filed a motion. I believe the Speaker will admit the motion. And basically what we're saying is that we as Parliament should request him to bring the agreements to us for consideration. And we will debate that motion. And we'll vote on the motion. Now, 2 things could happen. The motion could be defeated, okay? The motion is defeated, the matter doesn't end there. Because if the motion is defeated, we will have to go to the Supreme Court.
Right.
For the Supreme Court to determine whether or not, under our Constitution, such an agreement ought to come to Parliament for approval or not. You see, people have made this mistake in their understanding of the Constitution. They've always assumed that for domestic debts, domestic borrowing, the finance minister can go a borrowing and that is it. So long as in the national budget that was approved, a ceiling was indicated for him. That is the big mistake that has been made. And that has brought us to where we are today. Just assuming that once in the national budget, we approved, oh, you can go and borrow 1 billion, then he can go borrowing in the domestic market up to that 1 billion. And it is immaterial what terms and conditions he's borrowing at. And that is what I pointed out to my colleagues in Parliament. No, this has been a long-standing mistake. And I say so because the controlling provisions of the Constitution, written in simple English, are very clear.
Let me just, for the benefit of our viewers, put the Article 181. In fact, it's on the strength of this provision that you are seeking that this motion be admitted by the Speaker, correct?
Yes.
Look at this. Article 181 of the 1992 Constitution is going to be on the screen right now, and I read, Clause 3. No loan shall be raised by the government on behalf of itself or any other public institution or authority otherwise done by or under the authority of an Act of Parliament. Clause 4. An Act of Parliament enacted in accordance with Clause 3 of this article shall
provide.
A. Provide that the terms and conditions of a loan shall be laid before Parliament and shall not come into operation unless they have been approved by a resolution of Parliament. That's Clause 4.
Yes.
And then 6.
Defines a loan.
For the purposes of this article, loan includes any monies lent or given to or by the government on condition of return or repayment, and any other form of borrowing or lending in respect of which A. monies from the consolidated fund or any other fund may be used for payment or repayment. That's what you see there.
So basically, if you see the language of Article 181(4)(a), the focus is on the terms and conditions of a loan. So the focus on the terms and conditions of a loan, not even the amount. So no loan shall be contracted without parliamentary approval. So we presuppose that, you know, you will tell us how much the loan is. But then the interest of the Constitution is on the terms and conditions of the loans. So you can't just say that because we gave you approval in Parliament to borrow 1 billion, you can just go and then borrow. You have to come back to us anytime you are borrowing to tell us the terms and conditions under which the borrowing is taking place for us to approve for you. I mean, I had some media houses asking, oh, but you know, you approved it for him in Parliament. But it's simple. You monitor what happens in Parliament. We approve the national budget. Then we say, oh, we're going to pass a tax of 2% e-levy. Mm-hmm. If you recall, after we've approved the budget, subsequently, the minister has to bring a bill to impose the e-levy tax, if you recall.
Yes.
It's the same way, if in the budget, we said that we're going to borrow 1 billion, after we have passed the budget, which states the principle, you will have to bring the 1 billion loan to us. The confusion and the mistake has been to assume that there is a difference between domestic borrowing and international borrowing. And that when it comes to international borrowing, you need to go for parliamentary approval. But when you are borrowing from the domestic market, you don't need to go for parliamentary approval. And that confusion, I believe, you know, came as a result of Article 1815. And that says that this article shall, with the necessary modifications by Parliament, apply to an international business or economic transaction to which the government is a party as it applies to a loan. But, you know, 5 is only talking about international business transactions. It's not even talking about an international lending. Are you getting the situation? Right. Because lending of any character, whether domestic or international, is captured in 3 and 4. Lending of any character.
I see.
But you see, subsequently, different forms of transactions, which in themselves, in effect, are lending, emerged in international finance. Swaps, you know, what's it called? Barter trades, and all those things. So the inclusion of 5 is to make sure that some economic transactions, like even the power purchase agreements, that is where the power purchase agreements, you know, became an issue because they didn't look like lending. So you come and then set up a barge, generate electricity, and sell to the government of Ghana. It doesn't ordinarily look like lending, okay? But then the Constitution said, look, these are business and economic transactions of an international nature, and they impose some liabilities on the state if you don't live up to your terms of the bargain. And so these are matters that must also be the subject of parliamentary approval. So that shouldn't confuse people into thinking that, oh, anytime that is a foreign loan, then we need parliamentary approval. But when it is a domestic loan, or that if it is a loan, simply put, a loan, in the sense that you go to a data bank and then you contract a loan, that one you should come to Parliament. But when you go to data bank and issue securities to them, then you shouldn't come to Parliament. How is it that you can go to data bank and contract a loan of 1 million and you must come to Parliament, but if you issue a security of 1 billion, you shouldn't come to Parliament? That's so ridiculous. Yeah, it's so ridiculous. So I'm surprised that over the years we haven't seen through this and then done the right thing. But this is the time when an occasion arises where we'll have to insist on the right thing being done. Because as a Parliament, and I told my colleagues as a Parliament, look, we have a duty to protect our citizens. The history of parliamentary democracy is that it was set up to check the king, okay? And the king was the executive, because the king ruled without any checks. And after those revolutions, parliaments emerged as the voice of the people, and so that there will be constraints on the exercise of executive authority. So parliaments are to represent the people against the king, because it's not all the time that the king will be acting in the interest of the people. That is the ideological foundation of our democracy, that you have an executive that is elected every 4 years. But if you want to wait till 4 years for the people to express their opinion on that executive, by those 4 years, the time of the end of the 4 years, they would have finished doing to the people whatever they want to do. So you have a parliament to check them every day, to give approvals before they can do certain things, and then to stop them when they're doing certain things that you think are wrong through the parliamentary processes. So this is one such occasion when Parliament must rise up to the occasion and then say, look, we won't allow you to handle our pensioners this way. We won't allow you to handle our bondholders that way. We won't allow you to lead our banks in this direction, which might lead to banks collapsing and people losing their property, because we have that legislative power. It will come up to the numbers. But for me, I have a second buffer. And the second buffer is that even if we lose this motion in Parliament, the language is so clear that we can just walk to the Supreme Court. And I'm very sure that, you know, based on the Justice Abdullahi cases and other cases pronouncing on the supremacy of this Constitution, clearly, you know, even if, and some people say there's a provision in the Public Finance Management Act, Financial Management Act, that deals with the power of the minister to go and then auction for debt securities. That just tells him that he has the power to use a certain mechanism. It doesn't take away the requirement of parliamentary approval. It just says that you can also use auction mechanism to raise the money. But it doesn't mean that when you have raised the money, you shouldn't go to Parliament for them to approve the terms. Or that you shouldn't go to Parliament and say, I want to go and auction for money at 2%. Give me the approval at 2%. So Parliament has already given you the approval. So if you go and then you auction at 2%, that approval then applies to you. But in this case, you haven't come to us and say, I'm going to go and negotiate with the bondholders for a reduced rate of this and an extended tenure of that. And so please give me approval. The people themselves, if you had approached them and said, Parliament has given me approval to come and renegotiate these things, otherwise our economy will crash, they will know that their own representatives have bought into the idea. And so they should look at both you and their representatives for leadership.
But this wasn't.
That's how you carry the whole nation along in situations like this. When you go and coerce them, that look, you must renegotiate, and the people are crying, say, no, if you don't renegotiate, you lose the whole thing. Then you come back and tell us that, oh, they voluntarily agreed with you. How did they voluntarily agree with you? When you threaten them that if they didn't renegotiate, they will lose the whole thing. So there was no voluntariness in this. It was pure coercion. They were picketing every morning in front of your office, and you just insisted that if they didn't renegotiate, they would lose the money. So there's nothing voluntary about it. And you are not the final authority in this matter. The people elected us to serve as a check on you, and we must accept that position of a check. So I don't believe that this matter has ended. And I know that the World Bank, the IMF, they have legal advisors, and they will require that you must have complied with all your internal regulatory requirements before you make a commitment to them.
I'm bringing the Honorable Ayiko Otu on this. If the strength and meaning of Article 181 that we have just read, and which our viewers have also seen on the screen, is anything to go by, is there any contention in asking the finance minister to bring this domestic debt action program before Parliament, for Parliament to do its work?
Let me look at another article or a clause under 181. Let's zoom in on 3, clause 3. No loan shall be raised by the government on behalf of itself or any other public institution or authority otherwise than by or under the authority of an act of parliament. Which means that we should have an act of parliament which would regulate some of these things. My searches tells me we have the Loans Act of Ghana. And looking at the Loans Act of Ghana, Section 5 speaks about bonds. The minister may issue such bonds, promissory notes, or other instruments, and on such terms and conditions as may be necessary for the purpose of giving effect to the terms of any loan agreement entered into in accordance with this part of his act. Any bond, promissory note, or other instrument issued under subsection 1 of this section may be signed by the minister or by any other person designated in writing for that purpose for the minister. Now, 7. The terms and conditions of any loans obtained by government under Part 1 or 2 of this Act or any other enactment shall not come into operation unless they have been laid before the National Assembly and approved by the National Assembly by resolution. These are the provisions that worry me a bit as to whether these bonds fall under the same Loans Act, giving the minister the right to or the power to raise them, and whether they also have to go before Parliament. The argument as to whether the, we have to take our constitutional history also into consideration, because it is not everything which we do is written in black and white. Sometimes we use conventions. And for some time now, it appears that the domestic loans have been subsumed under the budget. That once they come and tell you that this is what they want to raise, and once you have approved it, then so be it. As to whether we need to take a second look at it in terms of some of the language used, which means that it is not even the Constitution which is giving you the right to go and borrow, but you should borrow under an act passed, approved by Parliament. Right. Because Parliament has oversight responsibility over the executive, so that at each point in time, we all know how much money we have raised, what is our national debt, and the rest. I remember John Mahama making that point, that those who are saying they don't know what...
Just to assist you, Senior. Yeah, just to assist you, Senior. The Public Financial Management Act, which is later in time than the Loans Act, provides in Section 103, repeals and savings. Repeals and savings. The following acts are repealed. A, the Financial Administration Act 2003. B, the Loans Act 1970.
Okay.
So the Loans Act has been repealed.
Okay.
It's no longer law.
So this is the latest.
So the latest is the Public Financial Management Act.
What does it say about such things?
Then section 56. Section 56 of the Loans Act, the Public Financial Management Act, now incorporates the constitutional provision.
Exactly.
And it provides that, sorry, I'm using my phone. It provides that approval of Parliament of terms and conditions of government borrowings. Terms and conditions of government borrowings. And it says, Section 56, 1, the terms and conditions of all government borrowings shall be laid before Parliament and shall not come into operation unless the terms and conditions are approved by a resolution of Parliament in accordance with Article 181 of the Constitution.
Right.
Now, people need to understand the difference between a resolution and an enactment. The Appropriations Act comes into operation by an enactment. And it will usually contain the lump sum of how much money you are allowed to borrow. Okay? Now, a resolution is of a lower, standard. And so you cannot say that because in the Appropriations Act an amount was allowed for you to go and borrow, when you borrow, the terms and conditions, you will not bring it for approval. Look, this happened under the NDC. It's been happening under the NPP. So for me, it's not a political issue. I think it is a point that has been missed by people exercising oversight in terms of the arrangements of the finances of this country. And it's the same thing, if you recall, I believe it may have been when you were Attorney General or so. International commercial transactions and business transactions never came to Parliament. They never came to Parliament. The governments just assumed that they could go and contract those things. Until one day somebody said, hey, wait.
Tested it.
You can't do that. The language is very, very clear. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, the language is actually very clear. The only thing that the Constitution doesn't do is to define what business or economic transaction is. Yes. So the Supreme Court then went through the process of assisting the Parliament to identify what constitutes an international, business and economic transaction, and gave meat to the two expressions, business and economic transaction, because the Constitution doesn't define business and economic transaction. So, but in this case, the Constitution is so clear that I am myself surprised that for close to 30 years now, we've all missed the point. And just assume that finance ministers can go borrowing domestically on whatever terms.
Why don't you still zoom in on the section that you have just read? Because it doesn't fundamentally change what was contained in the Loans Act. Because it still wants you to go to Parliament.
Yes.
So what do you think about that section? Is that not sufficient to back your claims, rather?
No,
I was trying to understand where you were coming from.
Yes.
Because we have all assumed that for domestic loans, there's no need to go anywhere.
Yes.
Once we brought your budget, we have approved it. That ends the matter. So when you started raising it, is it Friday or something? I started looking out again for it to see where is the basis of your argument. Then I came across the Loans Act.
I also looked at the Loans Act. I looked at it. You see?
So what you are saying is that this is the latest position, and it still says that the terms and conditions must be approved by Parliament.
Indeed.
In fact, the original Loans Act, 1970, were under constitutional review.
Yes.
So the original Loans Act itself didn't really, I think, even provide for National Assembly approval. I don't recall.
No, that's right.
It did. That's what I read.
Okay.
That's rather what it said.
Okay, all right.
It has been reaffirmed.
I thought that it was Azukrab in his revision of the laws who would have tried to bring it in terms with the 1992 Constitution. No, that was what he was doing. So I thought that he probably even inserted.
This 1970.
Yes, 1970. Yes.
Long before the new Constitution came into force.
Yes,
he was a statute revision commissioner who was to bring all the laws in conformity with the new Constitution.
That's what I'm saying. So I even assumed that he might have done that, inserted the National Assembly, which would make it consistent with the existing Constitution
at the
time. But later on, when we passed the Public Financial Management Act, we repealed the Loans Act, and then we made sure the Public Financial Management Act incorporated the provisions of Article 1814. 4A.
Yes.
So that is what you see in Section 56 of the Public Financial Management Act.
That's my point. Yes. Now, why don't you rather hit there if that is what you want? Because there's a provision for that.
Yes, no, I have. I mentioned the two. Now, I mentioned the two in Parliament. I said, look, this has just been included in the legislation. So it's not possible for anybody to assume that because there's a provision in the legislation that says that he can go and do auctions, that means that he can avoid the requirement of parliamentary approval. This is so clear, to be frank with you. I mean,
and that's why when you raise a question about how this has escaped all of you, members of Parliament, for that matter, until now, it's extremely important, because what you are seeking to do in this case is to correct a certain omission of oversight, which has persisted over the last 30 years. And that in itself, and I'll stay with Lawyer Aikwe too
Yes.
on this, because in the end, what this Mahama Yariga and 4 others individual members motion is going to do is now to not only bring all of us on the same path of what Parliament should have done over the period in checking borrowings of government, but would now also require that they, the members of Parliament themselves, would sit on every loan agreement, correct?
Yeah.
To ensure that all the boxes are ticked before approval is given. I want us to take a look at Honorable Oseche Mensah Bonsu's position, and I think when you raised this in Parliament on Thursday, he also brought up the argument of what the law says, right? That the old loans or the old bonds being exchanged for the new ones did not come to Parliament. So on the strength of that, the call you are making for this new arrangement to come before the House cannot hold. Take a look.
People would have better appreciation of where we are. Understand that we should all be contributing, just as members of Parliament are also contributing. And we hope we should be building confidence and trust. Once we open up much more than we have done, or maybe we did initially, people will come to appreciate and agree. And I will strongly urge the Minister to continue from here, not end it in Parliament, but to continue the public engagement. Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I thank you for the opportunity. And I believe all of us are wiser today after hearing the Finance Minister on this domestic debt exchange. I don't want to talk about the legalities that my colleague, the Honorable Mahama, raised. I disagree with him completely, because this is not a new loan that is being contracted. I disagree with him totally. It's not a new loan, but we can have another platform to debate that.
Why you go to on this? Is there any strength and locus on this?
Okay, let me deal with this from this angle. The bonds are usually offered by governments. So when government makes an offer, it is for the public, those who are interested, to go and accept the bond or the offer. When they accept the offer, looking at the terms, if they think it's favorable to them, why not? They buy in. Those who have time to wait, because this thing will mature in 6 years, 12 years, 15 years, you can do that. Now, my point of disagreement with Mama Yariga is this. If government says, come and change the old one with a new one, in my view, that is another offer that government is giving. Because it was government that gave you the first offer, which you accepted. Now it says, I'm giving you another offer. It is for you to decide whether to accept it or not, because the old one is there. In terms of sanctity of contracts, government cannot unilaterally change any terms. And the Attorney General told them that you can't do that. Don't attempt to change anything. You have entered into a contract with them, the people have bought it. It is completed, it's concluded, it's a finished transaction. So don't go there. If you want to amend any terms of a contract, it should be mutual. Let the two parties come together. So government now decides, says, okay, it is voluntary. If you like, come and buy the new one. In other words, instead of asking you to come and buy new bonds, it says, exchange the old ones with new ones. Debt exchange. You exchange the old ones with the new ones. It is voluntary to the extent that you can decide to go and exchange. Otherwise, hold on to the old one. But what we are saying is that how voluntary was that stance itself when you were constantly being told that the money will become useless or the bond will become useless in your hands if you don't go in for the new one.
I see.
So having spread fear and panic, people had to rush to go and say, okay, let's change them. So I know, like somebody put it, a bird in hand will be twice in the bush. Because I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the day when my... So to the extent that government said, come and exchange. If you don't like, hold on to the old one to that extent, I don't think that the minister did anything wrong. He did not unilaterally change the old ones. And as it's happening now, he's telling them that, well, I've exempted you, so go under your old bonds. Which means that he never changed anything. Continue to hold on to your old bonds.
But those
that's
in the
the
exchange have taken new bonds.
No, they went to exchange.
So
Their own
like the way you said, the
Oh, no, no,
voluntariness
I
was
share with you.
illusory,
No.
very illusory.
That
They
one
were
I agree
But you see,
completely with you.
lawyer, does the use and expression of this voluntary preclude Parliament's involvement in the process?
Let me.
You see, this is why I'm saying that, to the extent that if his interpretation of Section 56, which isn't different from the Loans Act that I read before, is saying that the terms and conditions of all government borrowings shall be laid before Parliament and shall not come into operation unless the terms and conditions are approved by a resolution of Parliament in accordance with Article 181. So this is an act which has been made pursuant to 1813.
That's right.
That is a Public Financial Management Act. And it repeats the same thing, that go to Parliament for approval. If that is accepted, and then the what do you call it? The practice of putting it under the budget, in his view, doesn't hold, then just like others went to Supreme Court to test the commercial transactions, that could be done. Because what we have done over the years is that we have all assumed that once government comes with a budget and it tells you this is what I intend to do, and you approve it, there's no need for them to come back. You see the point?
Right.
So it can always be tested. I mean, there's
so
nothing
that's
wrong
it.
with
Let's move
testing
forward.
it.
That's
It can be tested.
Yes.
Let me explain a little more, with all due respect to my senior. Let's say that government has given you bonds printed on red paper, and then later on says, "Oh, I've printed new bonds on a green paper. So bring your red paper bond and come and collect green paper bond." There's no change. It's just the color of the paper that has changed. The Constitution is particular about what Parliament should watch out for and monitor: the terms and conditions. The terms and conditions. Now, if the red paper bond contains terms 1, 2, 3, and the green paper bond contains terms 4, 5, 6. Once terms 1, 2, 3 exist, whether illegally or illegally, okay, which is an issue, and you now have to bring in a new green color bond, which has terms 4, 5, 6. Those are new terms. And what the Constitution says we Parliament should watch out for is the terms and conditions. The new bonds that you are offering to the state, does it have different terms and conditions? Once it has different terms and conditions, the constitutional imperative for parliamentary approval is triggered. Once the terms change, even if it changes in favor of government, it could change in favor of government, it could change to the detriment of government, but whichever way, it has changed. And once there's a change, the duty for parliament oversight to be triggered, comes in. That's the point that I'm making. And so the practice has been wrong. I'm admitting that it happened under NDC. Setekwe borrowed, hundreds of millions of Ghana cedis using the same mechanism. Dufo borrowed using the same mechanism. Baure borrowed using the same mechanism. And Ken Oforiatta is also borrowing using the same. Kwame Pepra, everybody borrowed using the same mechanism. But I'm saying that it is wrong because the language of the Constitution is very clear. And then we passed the Public Financial Management Act to regulate it. And the Public Financial Management Act does everything possible to make it easy for you, even dealing with the mechanisms of bond issuance. Because if you read, you see, we read 56.1, but we didn't read 56.2. If you read 56.2,
56.2.
it says that for the purpose of subsection 1, Parliament may, from time to time, by resolution, approve standard terms.
I read it.
Standard terms and conditions. So, if you contend that the bond issuance mechanism is such that it will be difficult for you every day to run to Parliament to come and say, oh, yesterday we were borrowing, you know, at 15%. Today we may be borrowing at 16%. Can you approve for me to run back to the market? You don't need to do that.
Right.
You can come to Parliament and say, look, I'm going to borrow, and I'm going to borrow at these standard terms. Approve it for me. Are you getting the situation?
Right.
And then once we approve it for you, and you go to the market and you borrow at those standard terms, then it works. And that is what we've done for international bond issuance. Okay? We issue and we tell you that go and borrow within these standard terms. Because we don't know when you go, what offer we made to you. Then you will have to run back to us. That's the mechanism. The thing is that the assumption has been that when it comes to domestic borrowing, we don't need parliamentary approval. That is the fundamental mistake.
That's the point.
Okay.
It's not that we don't even have the mechanisms to assist you carry out domestic borrowing. That's where the problem is.
But to add a little bit, you know, the distinguishing factor there of your green and pink colors and all that. What I'm saying is that when the pink comes to replace, for example, the green, unless it is affecting what you are holding, that necessarily that one no longer holds. The first one no longer holds. You are bound to come in for the second color. That is when you can say that there is some force being applied, in my view. But if you are still given the opportunity, go on with the old one or come for these new terms. That one, it is for you to accept or not to accept. Okay. But when it comes to the terms, like he's saying, that since the second one is also an offer that you are giving to the public, and remember, the domestic borrowing is through these bonds. When you go and buy a bond, you are borrowed or lent money to government.
Yes, exactly.
So it is still borrowing.
Exactly.
And so you are saying that in those circumstances, it ought to come back to Parliament. I am saying it can be tested. But I don't want to buy the point that because he offered a new one, then he has changed the old terms necessarily.
No, the new ones come on different terms.
Yes,
but they don't come on different terms.
But
There are two terms. There are two terms in there are two terms in a bond.
Yes.
The period and then the coupon rate.
Yes.
Those are the two terms.
Yes.
In every bond.
Yes.
Bond doesn't have anything beyond just the two terms.
Yes.
The duration and the coupon rate. The new ones now have new durations.
Yes.
And then they all have new coupon rates.
Yes.
Now, legally speaking, to be frank with you, legally speaking, I'm not sympathetic to the argument that I was coerced. No. In the court, you can't really, in my opinion, argue this successfully when you went and traded in the bond. Okay? Because you could actually go to court and challenge them. So and that's what the former Chief Justice said, that this is a contract. And you cannot force us. So if you cannot force us, why were you picketing there? You should have rather gone to the Supreme Court.
So the bondholders
you didn't have any business going to picket.
Yes, but
you should have encouraged the bondholders go to court and insist that it is your money, it is a loan, and they cannot unilaterally, you know, what do you call it? Vary the terms of the loan. And this argument by the finance minister that, well, you know, if you don't trade it in, you know, you lose your money. No, it's not possible for you to lose your money. Do you know why? Loans and interest on loans are the first charge on the public purse.
The first charge?
First charge. on the public purse.
In fact,
They are the first charge. So you could actually go to the court and restrain the government of Ghana, in my opinion, from paying salaries, from paying contractors until your debt to the government has been paid. Can you, for instance, owe somebody, and then at the end of the month, the man sees you living in a 30-bedroom mansion with 50 guards that you are paying, consuming electricity and water and etc. And then when you go to court, when the person sends you to court, then you tell the court, oh, let me finish paying my electricity bills and my 30, domestic workers, and then fueling my Safari, and then Lamborghini, and then whatever is left, then I now take care of the person that I owe. Where in the world have you ever heard this? So if you so you treat the state as an individual, and the state continues to collect money every day by way of taxes. So if you owe, you must consider paying the people you owe first before you even think about, constructing new roads, extending electricity, extending water, and all those, because that debt is the first charge on your income. Because no court will tolerate an individual saying that he will not pay his debt until he has finished resolving his domestic affairs.
Lawyer Martin Kpebu, bringing you out on this, because in fact, when you check the Bank of Ghana's own release, explaining this 44.5 billion that they financed the 2022 budget with, one of the reasons they said they did that was to actually give government money to pay for bonds that had matured. Inclusive of that 44.5 billion. Does the use of the expression voluntary preclude Parliament's involvement in any way, shape, or form?
As I can say, at this stage, absolutely none, or absolutely not. Because from what Honorable Mama Yaga is referred to, the Article 181 clauses 2 and 3 are clear. As he's rightly said it, in all these years, we are coming out of law school and going into law firms. You are made to understand that domestic borrowing, usually, there's no need for parliamentary approval. So
even in the law school?
Yes, so you grew up with it in the law firms. Yes, I remember seeing this years ago. So now that, but you see, as we keep reading the Constitution and as we develop, we begin to see more perspectives. So now that he's raising it, like he said, push it, because on the face of it, it makes sense. But the received wisdom was that once it's in the budget, oh, that's it. But now, you see, and the reason Honorable Mama Yarga's argument is more persuasive now is that, you see, number one, the opportunity given by Ms. Ofori-Atta to some people to convert their bonds into treasury bills. You see that we didn't hear about it until it was done. But if he was compelled to present this to Parliament, through our representatives, we would have heard about it. But you see, because the whole thing was shrouded in secrecy, he was able to do that. So for me, this is one reason that makes Honorable Mama Yarga's argument very appealing, so that we should support it, so that everything, there will be so much transparency. Remember, sunshine is the best disinfectant. So that if it was made known, then other bondholders will have an opportunity to decide. Then number two, you mentioned Bank of Ghana. You see this financing that Bank of Ghana did. Honorable, you may correct me if I'm wrong. Did they inform you at the time? No, they didn't. So this is another reason why the new argument that Honorable is making should hold sway, so that Bank of Ghana, in going to print 44 billion, will be compelled, either through the finance minister or through the reporting that Bank of Ghana does to the Parliament, inform Parliament ahead of time. And you see, also that will, Parliament will be able to rein in Bank of Ghana, because now as we have it, the current situation where we have, Bank of Ghana makes so much money. Bank of Ghana is rubbing shoulders with the commercial banks, making too much money. Too much money. Central Bank, making so much profit. Like what? Why? Is Bank of Ghana now a commercial bank? Is Bank of Ghana now a commercial bank? You compare around the world and you see that Bank of Ghana is making too much money. I don't have I think I left my phone in the car. I made some notes somewhere. But the key point, ask industry players, everybody tell that Bank of Ghana makes too much profit. Too much. So through this mechanism that Honorable is suggesting that all the borrowings come. I think through that, we'll be able to rein in Bank of Ghana. We'll be able to rein in Bank of Ghana. Yeah, and that's very important because then it means that at least we'll have some comfort that our representatives will be able to do something before Bank of Ghana just goes around lending money to government, printing willy-nilly, anyhow, and making so much money for itself when it should be a central bank, makes more money in terms of percentages than even the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank and other banks around the world. So for all these two reasons, the secrecy and opportunities granted to some people at the blind side of the rest of the domestic bondholders, specifically individual bondholders, and also reining in Bank of Ghana in this thing, I think that that's a good reason why the Parliament should have oversight on all borrowings. All borrowings. And don't forget even the 44-point-something billion. This Honorable Adongo is making the point that it's not 44 billion. It's a lot more. You see that discussion. I don't know if Mr. Okanse, you followed it.
Yes.
Honorable Adongo is saying that Bank of Ghana didn't do just 44 billion. It's a lot more. So I believe if we get this oversight, it would help our democracy a lot. And you see why we always tie in this matter of remove the immunities in Article 57, so that if the president knows that these kinds of things that they do, he will be prosecuted in future, he will sit up. Any president who knows that, look, when he leaves office, he can be prosecuted for such printing, hounding Bank of Ghana to print money, hounding Bank of Ghana to print money, could lead him to jail, he will sit up. So as for Article 57, we'll have to amend it. Make sure that any certain president, he does illegal acts or he's coercing officials to do any illegalities. When he leaves office, he can be prosecuted. And that will help strengthen our democracy.
Yeah. But there's still a window after he's left office when actions can be brought.
Yeah, 3 years by his
good
personal capacity.
The idea of providing immunity is that if you don't take care, people will bring frivolous actions just to divert attention of the president. Almost every time you have to be in court because your presence is necessary. But
no, I mean when he leaves office.
Yes. So
when he leaves office.
The 3 years within which you can do that, you can always do that. The constitutional provision.
Senior, but here it says personal capacity, things done by him in his personal capacity before or during his term of office.
Yes.
But this one, if he says the borrowing was in an official capacity, then blanket immunity. So that's one we want to remove.
Oh, that is what you are talking about.
Yeah, even his official actions, if we find that they were actuated by greed, by personal benefit, malice, all those ones.
Okay,
then you see Lula da Silva, Brazil. You see he went to jail, but eventually he won his appeal. He's back in office as president. You look at Israel, former president, they go to jail. So many other presidents around the world. So we should amend Article 57. Otherwise, that's why Akufo-Addo is behaving the way he's behaving. And as if there are no men in Ghana and we are all just quiet and watching. Because if we had dealt with 57, he wouldn't behave this way.
You didn't read it out in full for us to appreciate.
Okay, then see there, let me read it briefly.
The point you are making. But yes. I'm saying that now that you have explained that is the only aspect you are worried about. It shouldn't be only his personal.
Yes.
But even if there's evidence that he did these things, with an ulterior motive, and in criminal intent.
Exactly.
If you can establish that even when he leaves office, then why not? I don't think, because we are building a democracy.
Excellent.
Mama, you wanted to
just come in building on his earlier argument. Today we're not arguing about presidential immunity.
So we can actually we can table that for a bigger conversation another time. Yes. But I'm sure it's on this Bank of Ghana issue.
You shouldn't be worried about presidential immunity because ministers don't enjoy that type of immunity. And the borrowing is done by a minister. And the Public Financial Management Act, deals with it and provides the accountability mechanisms. So we can still hold somebody accountable. There's no doubt about that. Now, the issue about transparency and parliamentary oversight, which you drummed home about, that is actually the history that has informed Article 181, 3, and 4. After Nkrumah was overthrown, the NLC found out that he had borrowed so much, even after he benefited from huge reserves from the colonial authorities when they were living. By the time he was overthrown, he had borrowed so much, and those borrowings were not going to Parliament. It was after he was overthrown that the full length of the debt toad was discovered. And so the NLC had to go through a painful process of restructuring a lot of the debts to be able to have Ghana pay over a period of time. You recall that when Achampong came, he just took a radical view that he's not even going to pay at all. Are you getting the situation? But the NLC went through a difficult restructuring exercise. So when they were returning the country to constitutional rule and they were drafting a constitution, then the Constituent Assembly said that to avoid this thing from happening again, they were going to introduce a clause in the Constitution which will require that every borrowing should be brought to Parliament so that the terms and conditions are known by the people's representatives so that they can keep record of exactly how much borrowing has taken place, what are the terms and conditions, and how much interest we are going to be paying on what loans we have taken. So Article, I think 133, or is it 113, one of them, of the 1969 Constitution had the same provision. And then consistently in the 79 Constitution, it was repeated, okay? And then in the 92 Constitution, it was repeated with an addition of Clause 5. Because as time went on, we realized also that apart from strict loans, there were also international business and economic transactions which are in the nature of borrowing, but are not technically borrowing. And that even that will impose obligations on the state. And therefore, you need to rope those into the transparency and accountability mechanisms. Now, assuming that they were bringing the terms and conditions of domestic borrowings to Parliament, would have known that it is Data Bank that is mediating in the borrowing exercise. Would have known the exact interest rates for each, borrowing exercise that has taken place. And so would have been able to hold people accountable. This debate that we're having with the Bank of Ghana as to exactly how much. Because what they gave the government is actually borrowing.
Yes.
Okay?
They're making too much profit.
And it hasn't come to our attention until after the fact, after they've done it. So it is an important accountability mechanism that we've lost sight of, but there's nothing wrong with going back to the Constitution and obeying its imperatives. I don't think that there's any problem with it. It might make governance a little more difficult, but then where we find ourselves today should tell us that because we've adopted a lazy approach to the work that we've been doing, that's what has landed us into the situation that we find ourselves today. Therefore, we must sit up and do the right thing, and then make sure that finance ministers are transparent in the management of the finances of the country, and that Parliament is also up and doing in terms of holding the finance ministers accountable.
Dr. John Kwachi, Director of Research at the Institute of Economic Affairs, sends this, and I would have Honorable Amayerga, any of you speak to it briefly. He says, it is the Fiscal Responsibility Act that was suspended, not the Bank of Ghana Act, which limits the bank's lending to government to 5% of previous year's revenue. The 2022 lending of 44.5 billion breached the ceiling of 3.5 billion, being 5% of the 2021 revenue of 70 billion. But let me acknowledge the presence of Dr. Theo Achampong, who is an economist and political risk analyst, is joining us. Dr. Theo Achampong, can you hear us? Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, good morning. I can hear you. I hope you can hear me.
Great. We can hear you quite clearly and appreciate your time. Then earlier we were talking, and I'll come to you on this. The question about Dr. Theo Achampong, what we could have sacrificed, or we may have sacrificed, I beg your pardon, in getting this DDEP in just a little over 2 months, and what can be avoided going into this engagement with external creditors? Dr. Champong.
So what we've sacrificed, I think quickly, I've been following the conversation. It's really almost the stability of the financial sector and a number of the institutional players. And then secondly, also even a bigger issue of the trust that people have in investing in some of these government instruments. So for anyone who maybe did a little bit of finance, in finance there's this concept they call the risk-free rate, which basically that when you lend to a government or a sovereign, it's almost impossible for them to default on that lending or monies that you've advanced to them. And we use that as almost like the least common denominator in that sense to calculate other risk premium. In this particular exercise that the government of Ghana has undertaken, to the extent that it's had to offer terms, however improved they are, to different categories of bondholders, and still left them worse off than what they had before, it has actually created additional risk or additional uncertainty. And so the whole concept of, lending to government and that being risk-free, and therefore the government would always honor its payment obligations is basically, dead in the water. But that's coming off the back of a much, again, bigger problem of a financial sector cleanup exercise only a few years ago, where the same, government made a strong case back then that, well, if we don't save the banks would be going under, and that could have a much more ripple effect on the overall economy. Except this time around, it is not the banks that have caused this problem, but rather it is a very government that has caused the problem in the first instance. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing that I talked about is, the very sort of stability of the financial sector itself. I think this week we saw the reports out there that as a number of banks already are facing serious liquidity challenges. Of course, the government talks about the Financial Stability Fund. That is yet to be fully made available. And then there are some other kind of regulatory forbearances that they talk about. But even with all of that thrown in the mix, you will still have some banks that will struggle at the end of the day as a result of this domestic debt exchange program. So that's really, for me, are the 2 points. And then what does that mean for the external debt restructuring, which is the big one here? There's an important point that the finance minister made in his submission to Parliament during the course of this week, where he said that for the Eurobond holders, they may have to actually take a much bigger haircut than the bilaterals, so your IMF and the World Bank and things like that. And that is really an interesting one because so far, if you look at the Zambian debt restructuring exercise and the talks, all the external bond or creditors are asking for a similar treatment. So the NPV or the net present value of the losses that they expect should be evenly shared across the board amongst the different creditor categories. And China has actually also been advocating for same. But some of the other bilaterals are saying, no, that cannot be the case. And we need to have a differential way of treating them. And that's partly what has stalled, right, the process. And I think for the finance minister in Ghana's case to put that statement out and a subsequent report on Bloomberg, where a number of the Eurobond committee, one of the representatives, of the Eurobond committee holders actually made reference to the fact that they would want the government to treat all creditors, external creditors, the same, it means that we could actually be in for a complicated external debt restructuring process. Over.
I see. Now, you mentioned the Financial Stability Fund. I mean, the legalities as well we would get into. But that 15 billion initial money in that, of which is expected to be put in that Financial Stability Fund to cushion the institutions, is it enough to cushion all these institutions against the impact of this domestic debt exchange program?
Of course, it's not enough. I've made that point very clearly from the early days when the announcement was made. The total exchange so far, we're talking about almost 83 billion that the government says has been tendered in. We haven't gotten the breakdown of the different sort of categories, but even if we did, 15 billion for all of the banks that and other institutions that participated, it's not enough. There are other things like allowing them to have lower capital adequacy ratios and other sort of regulatory provisions. But in all of that, some of the banks would be taking much heftier losses than others, and that would have implications for the stability of the financial sector. And I've heard, people make reference to the fact that we may even have to do another sort of banking cleanup exercise all over again in order to safeguard the very financial viability of the sector that just 3-4 years ago we spent 25 billion helping to clean up. So it is not enough in that sense, it is what it is. We've gotten to this point, but definitely the whole trust that people had in government and to an extent wanting to even give loans to the state is going to take some time for that trust to be restored.
I see. Now, the amount itself, we set out to restructure 137 billion of our domestic debt. At the end of the exercise, the Finance Ministry statement indicated, and we're going to put that on the screen, there's a breakdown, indicated that just a little over 97 billion had been restructured. One, because of the pension funds that were excluded, which the last time I checked was about 26.9 billion, thereabout. If you take that out, and then also from what we got to know until the finance minister went to parliament, we didn't have the detail of some of the bonds being converted into treasury bills. So the amount being subject to the restructuring is a little over 97 billion. And the finance minister says about 85% of that amount has been achieved in terms of the restructuring. Is that enough to, as it were, I mean, the larger scheme of things, reduce our debts to sustainable levels?
No, it is not enough. We need to complete the external debt restructuring exercise as well to bring the debt numbers down. I have said on various other platforms in the last several months that the whole exercise and the attempt to actually bring the number we're working with is to bring that present value of the total debt from the 105 or so percent down to 55% by 2028, which then means that within 5 years, you have to almost have heavy cuts or adjustments to your debt in addition to cuts to government, expenditure as a result of the IMF program that you entered to before you can hit that 55% number. So the domestic component of it, which originally was 137, government says they revised the numbers down to 97, and some of us raised questions about, how does it magically drop from 137 to 97 And in the statement, they also mentioned the fact that, well, there were some exemptions, but there were also some people were allowed to convert from bonds to treasury bills. And we raised issues about why that was not, or that information was not given very early on. But be that as it may, the 97 billion figure now, 83 billion tendered, that's 80%. That's, 85%. That is a strong positive signal for Ghana as a whole going into the external debt restructuring, because you can go to your external creditors and say that, well, you were able to get as much as 8 in 10 of the people who needed to participate in that your domestic exercise do so and take on terms that were ultimately meant losses for them compared to what they originally had. So you can actually go to your external creditors and sit down with them and almost show them a template of what you've done with the domestic exercise and seek to get, even slightly bigger concessions for them, from them, in terms of your external debt. But like I said already, the stage has been set where the government wants to treat the external creditors differently. So it wants the Eurobond holders to take a much bigger haircut, and then the bilaterals to take a slightly lower haircut, and that is what can complicate the process.
And what kind of complication do you foresee happening with this approach, where the Eurobond holders are expected to take a much bigger haircut? Would they say that, look, because of the interests on the Eurobond, they would do the comparative analysis and knock it off against the losses they are going to make?
In fact, most of them have even done the comparative analysis already, and they've run sort of multiple scenarios and asking themselves, how much can they knock off or write off what is actually owed, right? So remember that a lot of the Eurobonds are held also by institutional creditors, right? Just like in Ghana, the domestic one, you had some of the banks and other institutions. These are outside here, some pension funds, big investment organizations who hold all of these. And they also have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to report on how well they're managing those funds. But of course, it's not only Ghana that they're investing in other places as part of their portfolio. So for many of them, yes, they can shoulder in some losses, and that already has been somewhat priced in. If you look at the trading levels of our debt, of our Eurobonds, I think now I was about 50 or 40 cents to the dollar in that respect. But they want to be treated fairly, and they want, if you're saying that we should all shoulder the burden, then treat us all fairly, not to make this sort of distinction where some people need to take much bigger losses as against others like the bilateral creditors. And that back and forth is what we've seen in some respect in Zambia, and may likely play out in Ghana's case.
Dr. Theo Champong, thank you so much for your thoughts on this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
As always, Dr. Theo Champong is a political risk analyst, is an economist, and also a vice president of Imani Africa. I still have in studio lawyer Nii Ayikwe-Otu, the former Ghana's High Commissioner to Canada, and also former Attorney General and Minister of Justice. Martin Kpebu is private legal practitioner and leader of one of 3 individual bondholder groups. Yombo Mama Yarga is a member of Parliament for Boko Central, also a legal practitioner, private legal practitioner. So I'm in the midst of lawyers. but there was that earlier point.
The joke in the studio is that you've lined up lawyers to discuss economic and financial issues.
that has some legal basis and undertones as well.
You know the history of the U.S. You know Hamilton. Yeah. Hamilton was a lawyer, and he established the U.S. A Federal Reserve System. The whole economic structure. He was a lawyer, not an economist.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
well, I mean, that's not to derogate from our capacity to engage in the discussion, because all these are regulated by laws.
Yes,
so
exactly.
there was an earlier issue about fiscal responsibility.
Dr. John Kwache raised that.
Yeah, that's true. The suspension of the Fiscal Responsibility Act has done so much damage to us, because then it enabled the finance minister and his team to exceed the limits that were imposed. And if you followed our debate or our commentary on his statement, we, the minority, called for, a reinstatement of
the Fiscal Responsibility Act.
Yes, because that's the problem.
I see. Now, so that established, and the issue of the Financial Stability Fund, you also raised questions about the legality of it.
I raised the legality of many of the things that the finance minister has been doing and communicating. So, first and foremost, these bond issue, we've discussed that extensively.
Indeed.
But you know also that a lot of the bonds, had to do with the commercial banks, the domestic banks. And so, when he renegotiated the terms of the bonds with these banks and deferred payments and reduced the coupon rates and etc., they were affected. Their liquidity has been affected. And so the discussion of what to do for them, how to help them out of the situation, involved, they making a commitment to create a financial sector stability fund. And he asked the banks, there was a statement that he issued asking the banks to go to the Ghana Amalgamated Trust PLC.
That's right.
To go and then get, solvency support from the Ghana Amalgamated Trust PLC. So there again, we raise legal issues. One, who is Ghana Amalgamated Trust PLC? I am in the Supreme Court with the GAD and the Attorney General.
I see.
Because I raise issues about the very legality of that entity. This is an entity that the finance minister established through some nebulous legal arrangement. He goes to a private company and tells the private company to go and incorporate another private company and hold the shares in trust for the Ministry of Finance. Then he comes to Parliament and secures a sovereign guarantee in favor of this private entity to go to the international financial market and lend money. And when they lend the money, they should use the money to support these banks. And they shouldn't just support these banks, but in supporting these banks, they should get the banks to issue to them preference shares redeemable by the holders of these shares. So the banks were caged because they really needed the liquidity support.
This was during the financial sector
This was during the financial sector cleanup. And then they were forced to go. So they went to GAD. GAD gave them the monies, but in exchange for preference shares. And guess what happened? I believe that at that time, the banks were depressed. So the values of the shares definitely would have declined. And so they took those banks, preference shares, at those depressed values. Then subsequently, they tell the banks that we are going to the stock exchange to go and auction these shares. And the value at that time, in the opinion of some of the banks, didn't reflect the new values of their shares. So it became a bit suspicious. And I said, no, this can't be allowed. So I went to the Supreme Court, and we're in the Supreme Court on this matter. That case is still pending in the Supreme Court. Then we now have a situation where you, the finance minister, has created another economic mess with its financial implications for these banks. They are in a very critical situation. Then you tell them that you are establishing a financial stability fund and that they should go back to this same GATT to go and then take the support. So we're asking the question, wait, first and foremost, GATT is not a public entity. You haven't come to us in Parliament to establish it by law. It's a privately registered company. So why are you using them in the first place? Secondly, Financial Stability Fund. Is it a private fund that you can have established from Data Bank, or is it a public fund? If it's a public fund, the laws of Ghana are very clear that you can only establish a fund by an act of Parliament.
Go to Parliament.
So you haven't come to Parliament for us to establish a fund. So how are you, announcing a Ghana Financial, Sector Stability Fund? And in any case, where is the money of the fund coming from? Is it private money? Again, are you coercing these banks to go to these private GATT establishment arrangements and then get themselves locked up in some deal that will ultimately involve their shares being auctioned, and then ultimately these banks will lose their interests, their control over their banks? Because the more money you give them in exchange for preference shares, whenever you dispose of the preference shares, you bring in third parties into the transaction. And those third parties could ultimately become majority shareholders of these banks. So the original owners of the banks will lose control over their banks through no fault of theirs, through your mismanagement of the finances of this country. And that is where I have an issue. That he cannot be allowed to do that. We must confront him. So those are the additional legal issues that I raised in Parliament. And that's what we're saying. He should come and bring the entire package of domestic debt exchange and mention all those things in it and go through the legal rigors of having them approved by Parliament. And it is in the approval processes that we will build in the protective mechanisms for either bondholders or pensioners, or even, let's say, owners of banks and the insurance institutions, everybody that has his money or an interest in it. Our job as Parliament in approving it is to introduce clauses and mechanisms that protect them. That's the whole idea. It's not that we want to sabotage the whole process, but we are looking into the future and the long-term consequences on individual interests and how we can ameliorate that. For him, all he's interested in is just to run to the IMF within the date that they have given him. But we are concerned about how do we do this less painfully to our citizens. And it would become political in the sense that the public is saying, look, you are asking us citizens to make sacrifices, but what sacrifices are you making as a state? What sacrifices are you yourself making? Because there's no evidence that you are making any sacrifices. And that's what we will ask for in Parliament. What sacrifices is government making
on this?
On this.
Now, when you go to because clearly, if these derivations or the questions that we're asking is anything to go by, certainly it should be of concern to anybody who wants or who demands transparency and accountability, and then also the protection and strengthening of the financial sector at the end of all of this. Honorable.
Well, I've listened carefully to him. I thought the government was setting up the Financial Stability Act. I was asking, where is the money going to come from? And have they gone to Parliament for approval? He's now telling us that there's something called Ghana Amalgamated Trust that they are being directed to go. With a government sovereign guarantee, if there is a government sovereign guarantee there, it means that whatever, if they are unable to pay their debts, then it is still government that must have to pay, not so?
Indeed.
That's why you have sovereign guarantee. So that's another worrying aspect. which must be looked at. If we go by the act that we all looked at, is it the
This is
the Section 56 of the
Public Financial Management Act.
Then it would be in our own interest to get some of these things, sent to Parliament for broader discussion, and for the perspectives to be looked at. It's not something coming from an individual, but that is what the law provides, which is also based on the Constitution itself, Article 181 and all that. So if you ask me, I think that there are a few difficulties or areas that needs to be cleaned up, and it would be better if we get some of these things done. But as I said, for now, following the convention that for domestic borrowing, these are not laid before Parliament, perhaps it will be, it's not something to be expected that the minister on his own may want to come. This one, I listened to the debate, and the Speaker put it in perspective that this is, at any one time, according to the standing order, a minister could come and make a statement. And that is why he didn't even want a debate. But after the statement, there could be comments. Yeah. So what he went to do there was that he went to make a statement, to Parliament, as to whether he should come and lay it before Parliament by way of a motion or something. That would be a different kettle of fish for now. So if, like the Marty Amidu cases, some of these things were tested in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court eventually came out with a clear ruling, which has now become the standard, that please, you are going to some international financial arrangement, make sure that you send the terms to Parliament for approval. Let's get the resolution done for you, and then you are fine. Otherwise, at the end of the day, the whole thing becomes null and void because it's going to be against the provisions of the Constitution. So it's food for thought. I mean, these discussions are not for nothing. That people will leave their homes very early, come and sit down and have a discussion. It's to enrich, our thoughts and things about the way we do things. So I believe people are listening, and it's sometimes not the best to categorize people. This man is in that camp. This man is NDC. So you don't even really want to listen to what they are saying.
I said the bond matter. Now the bond matter, because it affects both people in both camps. Now we are not being told that X is NDC and Y is NPP. Yes.
So let's elevate the discussion. Let's all talk about things that would eventually affect all of us. I mean, why? We are lucky. I've been telling people that when you go to school, you end up having doctors who are your friends. So when you are not well, you don't even need to go to hospital or clinic. You just pick a call and call a doctor. Hey, this place is so my friend, go and buy ABCD. And you see that we have had a better life expectancy. We're growing compared with our parents who might have kicked the budget early. So as we grow, we have to prepare for how we're going to live as pensioners. I mean, your children cannot always look at, you may be lucky if they are still around. Indeed. But because they have wives who think they cannot live with their in-laws, they decide to move out, and you'll be there alone, suffering. And if your financial arrangements has also been scuttled by some government matters, it is not the best, like the former Chief Justice was saying. We've suffered to put money aside, for our future. Now, getting to the end, you are messing us up, as it were. It affects everybody, and we are all getting to the 70s. Some have gone beyond the 70 already, 80s. Dr. Quiz and the rest, having serious, medical challenges, and then the only source of income, because compulsorily after 60 or 65, you've got to leave office. You are not earning anymore, and this is the only way by which you can help yourself. So this is something which affects everybody. it affects the confidence in the bank, you know. As we joked, we are all lawyers, but we are talking finance. That confidence in the bank, if we keep on doing this and people lose, you know, trust, how do we get them to work? And what happens to people's monies? Can we think of the other side, that the armed robber knows that you are keeping money at home? And so will you have your sleep?
Obviously not. Let me take people final one on this. We'll go to Boko as well, and we have some updates
so the
from there.
final issue I want to raise on this matter is that, look, the finance minister should come out clearly on the date that the matured bonds and coupons will be paid. Because on 6th February, 4.2 billion, that's approximately, of the bonds matured.
What happened?
No, he hasn't paid. Some of them belong to the banks, the insurance company, etc. But individual bondholders are also part. He said nothing. We kept making noise until then. Yesterday he mentioned that they will pay after the settlement
From
date.
February 21.
Yeah, when he said from, so which specific date? Is it on 22nd people will receive payment, 23rd, 24th? Because people need certainty. These are financial matters. They are not, and also the money is not freebies. He's not dashing the money to individual bondholders where he can say that he will do it as he pleases. This is governance. You borrowed somebody's money. It's time to pay. You haven't paid. And you don't have the courtesy to indicate to him the exact date you will pay. No courtesy. That's why I keep saying that it's not his fault. These are the very bonds that have made him a super millionaire today, he and the president. And he still has the effrontery to treat us shabbily like that. It's time to pay. You've not paid on the 6th of February. What do you do? Oh, please, creditors, I will pay you on 22nd. Period. He never said anything. We kept pushing. Then yesterday he came out, oh, it will be done after settlement. Yeah, so after 21st. Which date after 21st? Which date? Is he saying 22nd? 23rd February, 24th February, and then apart from the 6th February one, 2 other coupons have matured on the 13th or so, and then the 3rd one. So Mr. Ofori-Atta needs to communicate with us clearly.
I see. I understand you're going to start picketing at the ministry from Monday.
Yes, we're supposed to, but finally it was said that because yesterday, you know, he's repeated that he will pay, we should then give him up to the 21st and see. So he should indicate clearly which date is he going to pay.
Okay.
He should stop this insensitive behavior. He should stop this insensitive behavior.
It raises a larger problem that you say you are assuring those who have not come for the debt exchange that they can hold on to the old ones and that your commitments there would always be met. Now, this is the first test. Some have become due in February and you have not paid. So when I talk of fear and panic, that this is what made some people to run. Because you said, oh, no, don't worry, it's voluntary, we'll pay. Now the year is February, you have not paid. So where is the assurance that those who have other maturity dates different from February will get their money when that time comes?
Yeah, if you can say last sentence on this. So we are reminding the president that when he was in opposition, he said things like this could create an Arab Spring. Today it is worse. So when he was in opposition, he said things like this: the despondency, the unemployment, and today unemployment is higher than when he was in opposition. So isn't the Arab Spring coming back? The Arab Spring he warned, isn't it coming back?
I spoke with a banker about an investment. So that's just a small point. He said, look, the way things are going now, go in for fixed deposits with the banks. Because these fixed deposits are done by the banks themselves. And there's no way any bank will tell you that I won't pay you. But if you go there, the other way, you're going to have a difficulty.
This building back the trust is another hurdle that government will have to deal with after this entire process. But this is key point here on TV3. We're live as well on 3FM 92.7, on TV3 Ghana, on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, all across the world on 3news.com. Thank you to Dr. John Kwakye, who is the Director of Research of the IEA, also lawyer Eduji Tamaklo, and then also Dr. Kwame Asante, all as well of the University of Ghana. Thank you for the messages and the many of you as well on this one. Let's go to Bawku, because a number of things happened this week with the reported enskinment of another Bawku. Now, the government issued a statement, as a matter of fact, describing that as an illegal act. But a number of things now have come up as well after that statement. This is the Minister of Defense, the Honorable Dominic Nitiwul, Member of Parliament for the Bimbilla constituency, was talking about, this was before what this reported enskinment. He was talking about the instability in Bawku and what government has done so far. Take a look.
Careful who will defend, because Bawku is not what the Bawku used to know 2-3 years ago. Times have changed. But Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that we should all help to plug all the loopholes and cure the issues of Bawku. Because Bawku can lead Ghana into an abyss where terrorists can infiltrate into Ghana. So, Mr. Speaker, help the military and the security agencies so that the boys can lay down their arms. They can silence the guns. Please use your voices and appeal to them to silence the guns. Use your influence and appeal to the people to silence the guns. Mr. Speaker, use your influence as members of parliament to appeal to the people to lift the artificial boundaries that have been created in Bawku. And they know what I mean by the artificial boundaries that have been created in Bawku. Use your influence to allow people to go to their farms unhindered without being shot at. Use your influence to allow people to go to the market and trade without being hindered. Use your influence to travel freely from Bawku and in and out of Bawku without being accompanied by soldiers. Use your influence to tell the boys to sell the guns that they have. The AK.
Right, that was Dominic Nitiwul, the Minister of Defense, and then also Member of Parliament for the Bimbilla constituency. Then, afterwards, what happened this week? But the Member of Parliament for Bawku Central, the Honorable Mama Yarga, together with the Honorable Cletus Avoka and others, addressed the press this week. First of all, what is the current state of affairs in Bawku per your own update as you have it, Honorable?
Well, thank God, Bawku remains very calm and peaceful. I think everybody is working around the clock to try and maintain the peace. And it's not going to be easy, but that is what is prevailing now, that it remains calm and peaceful. But very, very tense. The tension is so high that I'm very worried about what that could mean or portend for all of us. I think that what is holding the place calm now is the statement that was issued by government. And the statement condemned what happened at the Nairi Palace. And in the statement, government said that what happened there was a nullity, and therefore the outcome is unacceptable, meaning that government does not recognize anything that happened there as an authentic installation or enskinment of anybody. So by that statement, government has been emphatic that there's no rival chief for Boku, and therefore the current and sitting chief should rest assured that no one is going to be countenanced to hold himself out as a rival chief of Boku. Now, they went beyond that and actually did indicate that present chief, Abogrago Azoka II, is the one recognized by the Regional House of Chiefs.
And the National House of Chiefs.
He's the one recognized by the National House of Chiefs. He's the one recognized by the government. And the person who the Nairi purported, in fact, that's the word government used, the person the government purported, Nairi purported to enskin, should not hold himself out because that's a criminal offense.
Yes.
And they were directing the police to actually arrest any such person holding himself out as a rival chief. That actually happens to be my uncle,
I see.
Yeah, that happens to be my uncle.
You mean the rival chief?
He's not a rival chief.
He's
not a rival chief.
Sorry.
By the statement that government has issued, he's not a rival chief.
Indeed.
But
the individual.
He's purporting to hold himself out. And government takes a position that is unacceptable, and the police should look for him and arrest him.
This is one Seydou Abagre Kolugu.
Yes, Seydou Abagre. So the issue on the ground in Boku now is that people are holding their fire and they are sitting and watching government to see whether government has the political will to walk the talk, to follow through with its own pronounced position on the matter. And indeed, we've all been appealing to everybody to leave the matter in the hands of government, and let's watch government and believe that government will walk the talk. Because they said it, nobody told them to say it, but they said it. And so if they've said it, we want to believe that they will do it. And if you don't wait for government and you take the law into your own hands, and then the law enforcement agencies come after you, then you would have, you have yourself to blame. So that is the situation. And Boku, so far, has remained calm because of that statement, because of the anticipation of the Kusasi side that government will follow through with a statement that it itself has made. So that's the position.
I see. Now, when I spoke to some security analysts, they make the point that it was quite surprising to them that the intelligence on the ground did not pick this event that we understand was done in the full glare of the public. I mean, you got to know after this enskinment had taken place. That issue also come up in terms of your own, that's you, the members of parliament in that area, your analysis of the situation?
Well, there are different versions of the story as to what happened. Depending on who you are talking to, they give you a different coloration. Government spokespersons have tried to convince everyone that it was an intelligence failure. They did not get to know. Others say they got to know very late, and the Northeastern Regional Minister was sent by the president to go and then stop it, and he failed to do so. Others just feel that there are people in government who deliberately orchestrated this, and it will be difficult for them to convince right-thinking, level-headed people that such a significant public event could have occurred without government intelligence apparatus picking it up and stopping it. So people have given different interpretations to what has happened. I'm not aware of the full facts, but it has happened. And government has taken a position. And we all expect that government will live through the position that it has taken for the purposes of bringing peace to the area. The most important thing now is how to maintain peace so that people can live in peace. Schools can resume, hospitals can resume, the markets will resume, and people can live normal lives in Boku. And so we are looking up to the government. It's a matter for the government to deal with.
And how are you going to on this development in Boku, please?
Well, it's a worrying thing. I mean, if people can arm themselves with implements for taking people's lives, you know, and causing mayhem. Yesterday I was listening to the news of tomato vehicle transporter who has been shot,
yes,
you know, just because he's transporting tomatoes and the rest. It means that nobody is assured of his life. If he wades into this conflict, anything can happen to him. My worry, however, is that the laws that we have now does not appear to be putting things more on government. It is more on the traditional authorities. The government must see to it, I mean, that is its first responsibility, that there's stability, there's peace, there's security for everybody, yes. But as to whether it is for government to decide who is a chief and all that, I have my problems with that. Article 272 says, Parliament shall have no power to enact any law which confers on any person or authority the right to accord or withdraw recognition to or from a chief for any purpose whatsoever, or in any way detracts or derogates from the honor and dignity of the institution of chieftaincy. These are to be left to the traditional authorities. I don't think that we have passed any new law based upon this new constitution. I don't remember. Or Chieftaincy Act. We have a new Chieftaincy Act, yes. 2007, very good. You know, and the words are quite clear in accordance with this constitution that it is the gazetting and the rest that will work, not necessarily because in the past, government can accord recognition to somebody, government will withdraw recognition, you know, and make life impossible for the people. And
indeed,
maybe the authorities or the traditional people say, this is the one we want. So the procedures are clear. If you are dealing with a paramount chief, then go to the Judicial Committee of a Regional House of Chiefs for the matters to be determined there for you. And if you are dealing with a divisional chief, go to a traditional, and then you can go and appeal to the Regional House of Chiefs, and finally even to the National House of Chiefs and Supreme Court, if you are still not satisfied. So my beef is this, that are we to look out for government to decide who to recognize, or it is only within the means of looking for peace and stability and safety of the people and controlling, you know, this madness of people arming themselves and causing trouble, you know. But otherwise, we will be walking a very dangerous route. We saw what happened in Yendi for years, you know, until we had to set up a committee of inquiry to go into this matter and then come out. We have a similar one at Nungwa, you know, where government had to set up another committee. The Ghana people went to see the president. They appealed to him to see if he can set up a similar committee to look into the Ghana chieftaincy affairs after the death of Nia Mugi. Up to now, nothing has happened,
Wow.
So it's as if government takes interest in other areas while it leaves other areas. But to me, speaking as a statesman, what I'm saying is that for purposes of making sure that there's peace and stability, we can always make sure we send our police and military and the rest. But as to whether I'm the chief or you are the chief, it's for the transitional authorities to decide. Because the point is that you can never have two chiefs sitting on one stool or two chiefs being enskined. So if already there was a chief, that chief has not been deskinned, he has not abdicated, he's not dead. Then how do you bring in another person? What are the issues? If he has done things for which he should be deskinned, then take him to the proper place and go and do what the law says. If he says he's liable to be deskinned, then you go and do the necessary, perform the necessary rituals and get him out of the place. But if indeed there is a chief, if I just heard the Honorable Mama Ayariga, that there's somebody sitting there, and then somebody has decided to go and make his uncle to skin him, and you cannot have two at the same time. What are they? Only three things can happen. He should abdicate, you should deskin him, or he should die. None of the three things had happened. So how do you now bring in a new person? If you go to court, that's what they say. We can't have two chiefs. It can only be one. If you think he's done anything wrong, take him to the proper place and let them go into the matter. Say it is liable to be deskinned. It would be taken off the thing, and the new one can come. But you cannot certainly have two people who claim to be chiefs. What is the title? Something Asoka.
Yes.
Abogrago Azoka, the second.
Of Boku. You can't have that. That one is wrong. Let government do that. But to say, of course, under the Chieftaincy Act, if I recall, holding yourself out as a chief when you are not, it's an offense. I think so. It's an offense, So that can be dealt with in that. But for recognition, as for me, I recognize this man. I don't recognize that man. I don't think government has that power. Government should be dabbling in that, because it is that kind of thing that led to all the problems that Kwame Nkrumah had, in his life. The Brong-Ahafo region, the Asante region, the problems that we had, recognitions and de-recognize. I recognize you today, tomorrow I won't recognize you. These were all that we took into consideration coming out with this new constitution and saying that leave those to the transitional authorities. Let them handle that one. So I want us to work gingerly a bit when we talk about we recognize, we don't recognize. It is the gazetting, and the gazetting is to be done by the chieftaincy tribunals themselves. They decide. You send what we call the CD forms, or chieftaincy declaration forms, to your traditional authority. They vet it, they send it to the region, they vet it, it goes to national, and then if they find there is no case about you, no action, nothing, then you are gazetted. So it means they do that. That gazetting is what government uses, that I deal with only gazetted chiefs. If you are not gazetted, I won't talk to you.
That's right.
I deal only with the...
But that's exactly what government has said.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
That to that extent, if you are only dealing with a gazetted chief, it's better than using the word recognition. I recognize, I don't recognize. No, I deal with a gazetted chief. If you are the gazetted person, I'm going to deal with you.
Okay. Yeah, Alfred, this is a very complex matter. So the safest and the best way to deal with it is what Honorable Ayikwe Otu mentioned, which is government trying to keep the peace. Yes, keep the peace. Keep the peace and do it well. Because I bemoan and I'm pained by the killings that the military did a few weeks ago. We can't continue to have the military kill citizens like that.
They have challenged that position.
Yes, they are trying. It's standard that they will deny, but we are not kids. We can read in between the line. That's the same way the military killed people in Techiman South. Is that Techiman South? The elections, 2020 elections. They continue to kill citizens. Why? So yes, government should by all means take steps to keep the peace, but they should be careful the way the military are deployed and military kill our citizens. The military need to desist. This excessive use of force is not helping us. You can't just kill citizens like that. You can't kill citizens like that. You don't have a country if you don't have citizens. And every life matters. Every life matters. So this act of shoot to kill must stop. It's as if we haven't learned anything from election 2020, when we lost 8 citizens. Then you go into one small place, Boko, and then the last count I knew there were, is it 10 people there? Oh no, Mama, I think you've taken some action on that. Yeah. 10 people, you kill people willy-nilly like that, as if human beings are fowls. No, that thing must stop. Our military has to be reined in. They can't continue doing that. It's a democracy. They had their chance through military regimes, and they showed that they couldn't do better. That's why now we are in a democracy. And so, we don't need them killing citizens needlessly. We don't need them killing citizens needlessly. If the military could lead, they had various things. You had JJ coming, you had a champion, and so on and so forth, Ankara and the rest. So they should stop these killings. These killings must stop. They must stop. Can't we do anything with rubber bullets? We've shown that over 20 years, and not even the rubber bullet. Now there's IEDs, okay? No, not IEDs. Now there are some special kind of bullets, okay, that don't kill. They are far better than the rubber bullets. Far better. Far better. So we should stop using live bullets in such engagements.
But just also put it on record that the military has actually contested this position of the reports that they were the ones behind these killings. The Honorable Mahama Ayariga, together with his group, have asked for investigations. In fact, the Honorable Mahama Ayariga has petitioned the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice on this matter. So we'll see how things play out. So stay with us. This is Key Point. We will be back shortly after this quick break.
Welcome to Lakeside Hills, a gated community which offers a peaceful and serene living experience. Today, we are going to be touring a beautiful 2-bedroom standard house measuring 85 square meters. As we enter the house, we are greeted by a cozy living room that is perfect for entertaining your guests and relaxing after a long day's work. The large windows allow plenty of natural lights to flood in, illuminating the space and making it feel inviting. The first bedroom is cute and adorable, perfect for young couples and growing families. The second bedroom is connected to its very own bathroom, providing the perfect setting for guests or anyone that values their privacy. The kitchen has been designed to be both functional and stylish. The modern appliances and the classy cabinet make it perfect for the home chef or anyone who enjoys cooking. The house also features a compound that can comfortably park 2 cars, and it's also partly powered by an AC solar system. If you're looking for a peaceful and a serene living experience in a gated community with so many amenities, then Lakeside Hills is the place for you.
Mothers of Africa.
Mama, will I ever be a soccer champion for Ghana?
Well, you've got to be like a geisha ball. Stay strong and go so far. Never give up till you reach your goal.
Okay, Mama, I'll be strong and go so far, lasting long like this geisha ball.
Be strong and last long.
Like geisha.
Everybody, this is us.
Us. Yay! We are talented.
We have skill. We are smart. We have brought you the most exciting kids show with so much to learn. Don't miss out on the latest episodes of the Kids Arena because it promises to be fun, interactive, and educative.
Kids TV has taken a whole new direction and we are excited to be part of it.
Mom and Dad, come and join us. Jump around us as we take you into a whole new world.
Kids Arena,
This is us. In the Kids Arena, yay!
Kids Arena shows Saturdays at 10 a.m. on TV3. Don't miss it.
1xBet, reliable bookmaker with high odds, wide selection on events, and bonuses for every taste. 1xBet, easy use, easy win.
This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the Gaming Commission of Ghana. Bet responsibly, not for persons below 18 years.
Mothers of Africa.
Mama, will I ever be a soccer champion for Ghana?
Well, you've got to be like a geisha ball. Stay strong and go so far. Never give up till you reach your goal.
Okay, Mama, I'll be strong and go so far, lasting long like this geisha bar.
Be strong and last long.
Like geisha.
Hello, and welcome to the biggest family dance show. It's a big old family dance.
The battle line has been drawn. The families have been selected and ready to be unveiled.
All right, now let's get ready to boogie.
That's what I'm talking about. You see, you guys use the stage everywhere.
Ghana family, Ghana family. Will it be your family? Make a date to catch all the fun right here on the Bigo Family Dance. This and every Saturday at 8 p.m. right here on TV3.
Bigo Family Dance shows Saturdays at 8 p.m. on TV3. Brought to you by Bigo Drinks.
Welcome back to Key Point. On TV3, we're live also on 3FM 92.7. We're also live on DSTV channel 279 and all across the world on 3news.com. So we got this news earlier. It's about 4 a.m. before we came on air, but we had to ensure that we tick all the boxes and wait for the official communication. And I think that it's already out there and many of you have been reacting to it. So the news of Christian Atwu's passing has now been confirmed by both the club and his manager, his private manager, who is Ghanaian. So this is the development as we have it. Ghanaian football star Christian Atwu has been confirmed dead. His remains were found in his room from what his agent put out, tweeted earlier today, that his body was found in his room. The family has been duly informed about this development, and they are also making arrangements for his body to be flown to Ghana. There is a statement from the Foreign Affairs Ministry as well on this. We have a copy, and we'll put that statement on the screen in a bit. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration has received the unfortunate news of the recovery of the body of Christian Atsu from the rubble of his apartment following the earthquake which struck on the 6th of February 2023. This comes after almost 12 days of tortuous search by a rescue team. The Ghana Embassy in Turkey, which conveyed the sad news, indicates that the body was recovered early this morning, Saturday, 18 February 2023. The elder brother and twin sister of Christian Atsu and an officer of the embassy were present at the site when the body was recovered. Government extends to the widow and family of Christian Atsu our deepest condolences. The embassy is currently making the necessary arrangements with the assistance of the government of Turkey to have the body transported to Ghana for burial. The public will be updated on further developments. This is a statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration of the Republic of Ghana. And our sources in Turkey, specifically the Ankara in Turkey, have also been corresponding with us. And yeah, it's just the sad reality. Honorable Mama Yerga, because you've been a former Minister of Youth and Sports, I'm sure that, yes, let me have your take on this, please.
Well, I mean, since the news broke of the events in Turkey, the earthquake, I mean, and the revelation that he was missing, we've all been praying and hoping that somehow, some way, he emerges out of it still alive. I mean, as time passed and days turned into night and night turns into day, of course, many people began to lose hope. The recent news about some people still being discovered in the wreckage alive gave some of us hope that it is possible that our brother might also be able to survive such an ordeal. So we still had some hope. And yesterday, I listened to the news, and his manager was still giving us something to hope about, and said they had sent his photos around the hospitals, and they were still hoping that somehow he might have been picked somewhere and then sent to a hospital, but because they don't know him, they may not have been able to draw the attention of anybody who knew him. So they were hoping that he will be found in some hospital in some condition. So even as at last night, I mean yesterday, so this comes not too much as a surprise, but it's painful. And I got close to him when I was Minister for Youth and Sports, and I was part of their delegation to the African Cup of Nations in Equatorial Guinea. And in our match against Guinea, he scored perhaps the best goal in the tournament. He scored the best goal in the tournament. I mean, the distance from which he scored that goal, made the goal the best goal of the tournament. And so, I mean, I have known him a bit, from those days, and we've all been following his career. So it comes as a real blow to us as Ghanaians, to the Black Stars, and lovers of football, that this has happened to him. It's most unfortunate. I mean, Ghanaians, we tend to be religious people, and we say that as for that, it will meet you where it will meet you. You have no control over that one. It's come to princes, it's come to kings, it's come to paupers, it comes to the most famous, it's come to those hardly known. And at this point, we just have to express our condolences to his family and to those who are very close to him. There's nothing we can do about it. It's happened to so many other Ghanaians in Turkey. I'm not sure he's the only Ghanaian that has been caught in that. It just happens to be the case that he is prominent. And so all of us, our attention has been drawn to the fact that he is there, and we're trying to find him. But I'm sure many other Ghanaians may have been caught in it.
In fact, the ambassador, I spoke to her, that they said all the Ghanaians who are living in the affected areas have actually been accounted for.
Oh, wonderful.
And
wonderful.
They've been taken to Ankara and other places where Ghanaians are, and they are being taken care of.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So
then we thank God.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, we thank God. And to imagine that he's the only person, Ghanaian, who will be caught in that is very sad.
Like will too, please, and I'll give the final word in a minute.
Like we saw in the just ended World Cup, many people were hoping that Lionel Messi will win the World Cup, at least to crown all his efforts. And that reminds me that almost everybody was talking about Christian Atru, BBC, everywhere. He has been found, he's not been found, he's been taken to hospital. There was so much goodwill everywhere that this person's life will be spared, but like the Bible says, our thoughts are not the thoughts of God, our ways are not his ways. He has decided that this is the end of the road for him, and so be it. We're talking about more than, how many people are we talking together from Turkey and Syria?
44,000
that have lost their lives. It's most unfortunate that our prayers could not, like Jesus Christ said, if you allow this cup to pass by me, it is your will, not my will. So we've done our best. We prayed for him. We have hoped that all out throughout the world that his life will be spared. But alas, that is the end today. We commit his soul to the hands of God, and we wish him a peaceful rest.
Nice. Briefly, quick. We have just less than a minute.
Okay. So may his soul rest in peace. May his soul rest in peace. And my condolences to the family. I know it's difficult, but the good Lord knows best. So I pray that they will find strength to take it in good faith.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Martin Kpebu is private legal practitioner, leader of the individual bondholders. Also, the Honorable Mama Yariga is Member of Parliament for Boko Central and former Minister of Youth and Sports. And then also, Ni Aikoyotu is Ghana's immediate past High Commissioner to Canada, former Attorney General and Minister of Justice. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate your time. I am Alfred Okanse. Thank you for staying with us on Key Point. Keep watching TV3 and also listening to 3FM 92.7. Have a great weekend.